I found them on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after we buried her. Just a shoebox sitting in the back of her closet under old winter blankets, like it had been waiting there for years. When I picked it up, the rubber band around it snapped immediately, like it had been holding on just long enough for me to find it. Inside there were letters. Not a few, maybe 30, maybe more, all handwritten, all in my mother's handwriting, that slightly slanted cursive I knew so well from grocery lists and birthday cards and little notes she'd leave on my pillow when I was a kid. But these were not grocery lists. Every single envelope had the same name on it. David. No last name, no return address, just David written in blue ink over and over again on every single envelope. I sat down right there on the floor of her bedroom, still holding the box, just staring at them. My mother had been gone for 3 weeks. I was there to pack up her things, to do the painful practical work of closing down someone's life, and instead I was sitting on the floor holding 30 letters addressed to a man I had never heard of in my entire life. My mother was 63 when she died. I am 31. I thought I knew everything about her. She was the kind of woman who told you what she was thinking before you even asked, who called me every Sunday morning without fail, who cried at commercials and kept photographs of everyone she ever loved on her refrigerator. I thought she was an open book. And then I found the box. I didn't open the letters that day. I couldn't. I put the shoebox on her kitchen table, made myself a cup of tea, and sat across from it for almost an hour just looking at it, because something about those letters felt fragile, like if I moved too fast I would break something that couldn't be fixed. So I waited. And when the tea went cold and the apartment got quiet, I reached across the table and picked up the first letter. The date at the top said March, 1991. I wasn't born yet. My mother was 32 years old. And the first line said, I still think about the night we stood on that bridge, and you told me you weren't afraid of anything. I put the letter down and then I picked it back up and I read it again. And just like that, my mother became a stranger to me, not in a cold way, not in a way that made me love her less, but in the way that happens when you realize the person you thought you knew completely had an entire life inside her that she never showed you. I read every single letter that night. All 30 of them, sitting at her kitchen table until 2 in the morning. And by the time I finished, I understood something that broke my heart completely. She had loved this man. Not casually, not briefly. She had loved him the way you love someone when you're young, and you don't yet know how to protect yourself from it. Completely, without a single wall up, without any plan for what happens if it doesn't work out. And it didn't work out. Not because they stopped loving each other, but because life got in the way in that specific brutal way that it sometimes does. They separated, and my mother never stopped thinking about him, not even 30 years later, not even when she was sitting at the same kitchen table where I used to do my homework. She had found his address. It was written carefully at the top of the very last letter. A real street name, a real city, a zip code. She had found him, she had written the letter, and she had never sent it. Not one letter. Not one out of 30. I looked at that address for a long time. And then I made a decision that I knew she never could. The address was in a small town about 2 hours from where my mother had lived her entire life. I had never been there, never had any reason to go there, and I sat in my car outside her apartment building for a while before I finally started driving because I still wasn't completely sure I was doing the right thing. But I had those letters on the passenger seat next to me, and somehow that felt like enough of a reason. The drive gave me time to think about everything I had read the night before. The letters weren't in any particular order inside the box, so I had read them out of sequence at first, jumping from 1991 to 1998 to 2004, piecing together the story like a puzzle, and by the end I had a picture that I never expected to find inside my mother's closet. She had met David when she was 24 years old. They worked in the same building, different companies, different floors, and they met in an elevator one morning and somehow ended up talking for 45 minutes in the lobby without even realizing how much time had passed. That was the first letter. That was where it started. They were together for almost 3 years. 3 years of weekends and inside jokes and that bridge she kept writing about, the one where he told her he wasn't afraid of anything. 3 years of being completely, totally in love with someone in the way that only really happens when you're young enough to still believe it will last forever. And then his company transferred him. Not to another city, to another country. And this was before email, before any of the ways we have now to make distance feel smaller. He asked her to come with him. She wanted to. But her mother was sick and she was the only one who could stay, and so she stayed and he went, And they tried for a while to hold on to something across an ocean with letters and phone calls and promises. But it didn't hold. And eventually the letters from him stopped coming. And my mother, 27 years old, put away the part of herself that had loved him and got on with her life, because that is what you do when you don't have any other choice. She met my father 2 years later. She married him. She had me. She built a whole life, a real life, a good life, and I want to be clear about that because reading those letters I never once got the feeling that she was unhappy. I never got the feeling that she regretted her life or wished she had made different choices. But David was still there. Quietly, in the background, in the part of her that she never talked about. And sometime around 2003, when I was about 8 years old and probably sitting in the next room watching cartoons, my mother sat down at her kitchen table and started writing to him again. Not to send. Just to write. Just to say the things that had no other place to go. She wrote about her life. About me. About the way certain songs still reminded her of him after all those years. She wrote about the bridge more than once. She kept coming back to that bridge, to that one night, to that one sentence he said. She wrote about getting older and understanding things she hadn't understood when she was young. And in the very last letter, the one dated just 8 months before she died, she wrote that she had found his address through an old mutual friend, and that she had been sitting with it for weeks, and that every single day she thought about sending something and every single day she decided not to. She wrote, "I don't know what I would even say to him after all this time. I don't know if it would give me anything, or if it would just open something that is better left closed. So I keep the address, and I keep writing, and maybe that is enough." It wasn't enough. I know that now. It wasn't enough because she ran out of time, and those letters stayed in that box, and nobody ever knew they existed except her. And me now. I pulled up outside his house on a Saturday morning. It was a regular house on a regular street, small front garden, a car in the driveway, curtains in the windows. Nothing about it looked like the home of someone who had been carrying half of a love story for 30 years without knowing it. I sat in the car for probably 10 minutes. I had the last letter in my hand. I had no plan, no speech, no idea what I was going to say when the door opened. I just knew that I had driven 2 hours with 30 unsent letters, and I was not going to drive home without knocking. So I knocked. I heard footsteps, a pause, and then the door opened. He was older, obviously. He had to be in his late 60s, gray hair, a little heavier than I imagined him from my mother's descriptions. He looked at me the way you look at someone you don't recognize but feel like maybe you should. And then something shifted in his face. Something quiet and slow, like a light changing in a room. He said, "You look just like her." I hadn't told him anything yet. I hadn't said a single word. But he already knew just from looking at my face, just from the shape of something he recognized across 30 years and 2 hours of highway. I told him who I was. I told him she was gone. I watched his face do something I don't have the right words for. Not shock exactly, more like something he had been half bracing for without realizing it. Some part of him that had always known this call or this knock might come someday. He invited me inside. We sat at his kitchen table, and I put the letters down between us and I told him everything. He didn't speak for a long time after I finished. He just looked at the box, at her handwriting on the envelopes, at his own name written in blue ink 30 times over. And then he got up, quietly, and went to a shelf on the other side of the room, and came back with something in his hand. It was a bundle of letters. His handwriting. Her name on every envelope. He set them down next to hers on the table and he said, "I stopped sending them when I thought she had moved on. But I never stopped writing." We sat there together for a long time, 2 people at a kitchen table with a lifetime of unsent letters between us, and outside the window the morning kept going the way mornings do. Birds, traffic, a neighbor's dog, the whole ordinary world moving forward like nothing had just cracked open inside that house. Before I left, I gave him her letters. All 30 of them. He held the box with both hands and he didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. And when I got to the door he said, "She was the best person I ever knew. I hope she knew that." I turned around and I looked at him and I said, "She did. I think she always did." And then I walked to my car and I drove home and I didn't turn the radio on the whole way back.